In the winter of 2010, planning began for the upcoming growing season, and this time plans included a spud patch experiment. To begin the project, the soil was tilled, staked, fenced, and prepped into a 4 by 8 foot test bin. Nutrients were added. Soil was watered. A couple of days later, seed potatoes were carefully placed and barely covered. This was followed by a covering of 6 to 8 inches of year-old hay. When the first bin was done, the second one was made right behind the first. Then came the anxious waiting for the little spudlings to emerge. About 6 weeks later, they did. Once they grew enough to start leaning, another 6 inches or so of hay was added, and the waiting resumed until harvest time. Mother Nature did all the watering. The hay prevented weeds from growing, supported the plants, and kept the soil moist but not wet, which was good because it rained a lot and it was very cool that summer. When it came time to harvest, all that needed to be done was roll up the hay and start picking up the potatoes. The hay composted nicely and the potatoes grew in the composted material between the dry hay and the soil. A few spuds were just under the surface of the soil, but most lay right on top, easy to find, and no digging was involved. The harvest procedure changed a little with the second bin. It was discovered that pulling the plants before rolling the hay required much less effort. Some of the spuds were small, some were large, but most were medium and were relatively uniform in size and shape. None were green, so the hay did its job preventing the light from getting to them, and the only bad ones were the seed potatoes, of which only a couple didn't germinate. Once all the potatoes were exposed in both bins, they were gathered and the hay was rolled back into place. Although a little less than 2 bales of hay were used in the experiment, it was a great way to use what would otherwise be discarded as unusable. A few tiny potatoes were recovered and left as an experiment for the following year to see if any would make it through the long, cold Alaskan winter to germinate after the spring thaw. Since they were little potatoes and no additional hay was added, their survival is somewhat doubtful, but you just never know what will happen. A total of about 8 pounds of seed potatoes were used in the original experiment. In 2 4 by 8 foot bins, which is a total of 64 square feet, the yield totaled about 120 pounds of Yukon Gold potatoes. Overall, the results of the experiment were good, considering the questionable seed potatoes and the cold, wet summer in the far, far north.